So let's go ahead and get into I don't know how much time we have, and if you're looking to keep it in a certain spot. Um, let's go ahead and look at how we would kind of light and operate in this normally. And a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about are general concepts, so you can adapt them to whatever angles you do choose,
Right.
and things like that. Um,
Do we want to start with like the
I
singles?
I would start with these overs, yeah, because I think that all of our concepts are going to play here, and then you can adapt them to the other shots. So generally speaking, when we light for drama, we're looking to light from the far side so that the camera is on the shadow side of the person. So that's already happening a little bit here. If you notice, the brighter side is the side that's
Yeah. Let
not
me
on
let me
the camera
turn
side.
on. Okay, so this is what it looks like just with practical.
Right, which is fine because our background's, interestingly lit,
Mhm.
and whatnot. Um, but what we're going to be looking for here is to light the characters in a way that kind of makes sense for the space as well.
Right.
So let's do a little bit of reframing.
All right.
Let's change the focal length, I think, to uh, let's do a 40 millimeter, just to give us a little bit of extra. And let's move the camera kind of more behind Robert's shoulder
Okay. Let me
to where we
grab.
kind of get the kind of the crook of his shoulder kind of in the corner of the frame, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yep. Let me grab. I think it's. Let me make sure I can get it. So it's this
Actually,
camera. Oh.
actually, I'm thinking about this because if we move that camera where they're seated now, if we move the camera, that column is going to be like directly behind
Oh. So
Williams, and
yeah.
it's going to
Yeah.
basically be his background. But I kind of like where the background is now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Should I
actually
just move?
thinking
Should I just move
if you
Roberts?
just them, uh, slide Roberts a little more into the camera,
Yeah.
that
Let's
we
see.
might have a better time of it.
Yeah. All right. Let me turn that back on. Cool. And let me slide. There we go. So just
Yeah.
um.
Yeah, like that.
So this has his head. It has his shoulder. Something like that.
Because when you activate the depth of field, he's going to blur out
Right.
anyway, and he's mostly just going to be there for what we would call kind of
Just reference.
visual reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I think what we could do is move Williams a little bit in the opposite direction.
All right. Let's see. Let me grab this. Actually, switch modes here. There we go. And we're gonna move him left or right.
Uh, our as the view is looking right now to our left,
Okay. Something like this.
a little bit farther actually.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And why is I'm going to change the camera angle
Okay.
next.
Yeah.
So the camera should come up a little bit, so
So
we need to look down on him a little bit so that we're coming over his shoulder.
okay.
And then if you move the camera closer so that he gets a little bigger in the frame
All right. Something like that.
on the Z axis. Yeah.
And then do we want to move the camera left a little
And
bit more?
and then we're
Because
going to go back left. Yeah.
so yeah. Because it's very
Yeah.
faint, but I have some thirds guides set up here as well, just for
Nice.
reference.
So that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. Probably even if we want to like center his eye right the
Yeah, I mean you can get super technical about it, but yeah, something
something
more
like
like
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um so what we would do, and our general rules of thumb, is that behind the camera should be shadow, right? So what we want to do, is, even without seeing the light sim, what I can tell you is that all of those top windows that
Yeah.
are in line with them or to the camera's right should be blacked out, basically.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, just basically we want less bout sliding back here.
So looking at this top-down view on the left here,
Yeah.
those last two sections of windows to our left,
Yeah.
we want to block the light from coming in those.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that way we won't get any extra fill on their faces, and then we can control the fill.
Right.
So if that literally just means you drop solids, like just straight squares in front of them,
yeah,
that's
that
easy.
real quick. Let's see. Rotate this. Oh, come on. There you go. All right. And we want this to be way over here. Let me make sure I have a holdout material on it. And that's going to be there. Let me view it from this angle. And we want something like this. I think I can already see it starting to get darker. And that's, let's see. Well, we might need to cover a little bit more.
Well, and so we'll kind of get there as we go. But this is going to be more of a checklist as far as like what should be done.
Yeah.
And we're probably gonna fly a solid much closer to the actors so that we don't have to negative a room. We can just negative right outside of the frame.
Right.
So I think what we should do now, basically we're gonna set up we're going to use the main rules of what we would call 3-point lighting, right? So
I realized, I think I put this in the wrong place. Come on. Our characters are basically, oh, you know what? That's across the room. Never mind. No wonder it didn't work. And that's on this side. There we go.
Ah,
I think that's working. So yeah,
well,
basically I have
darker.
I got it reversed. So they're right here, and the windows are about right there.
Gotcha.
So that's at least blocking those. Obviously, we have a lot of light coming from the left from other stuff.
And that's fine, because what we're going to use is we're going to use that feeling to motivate which side the key comes from. So the key is always going to come from the rest of the building, because even though it doesn't make sense that the sun would ever hit them directly, we're going to kind of just make it feel right.
Right, yeah.
So the light should always be coming from the open part of the building, basically.
Gotcha.
So we're going to use the concepts of 3-point lighting, and there's 3 terms: the key light, the fill light, and a back or edge light. We're going to use all of those terms. And what we're going to do is we're going to work on the key right now. Okay. So we want one of those area sources that you can make a square.
Right. Let's see. In fact, I'm going to have some other light here. I'll probably just delete these, and we'll start from scratch. All right. So let's see. You said start with an area light?
Yes. And that was the one where we can decide the shape of, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So we want this one basically to the left. And let's see. It's a little bit tricky to see.
So looking at the geography there, we're going to want this light probably in the space that's kind of centered between those 4 tables, including the one where they're at. So those, right. And then we want to basically point it directly at him.
Okay. So yeah, and here's a neat trick inside of Blender. If I use Control-0, I can actually look through the light as if it's the camera.
Oh, nice.
And I think about there. Something like that. That may be too high. Yeah, it looks like
it is going to be too high. So
let's drop
what
that.
We're often looking for is one of the most dramatic types of lighting is side lighting. So where you're kind of coming almost from the side. So we want to be just above his eye line and then pointed right at his face, basically.
Let's see. Something like fact, let me look at, yeah, okay, something about right there.
Yeah.
And let me switch back to our other camera. Okay. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So let's move it. Let's move it more in front of him, so we get just a little bit more on his other cheek. But that's very close. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Rotate this.
Yeah.
Even more?
Yes. No, I think for now that's all right. We might play later with the idea of a fill light. Um, but that's nice. And in theory, we actually should be seeing the specular in his eyeballs.
Right. In
Which
fact,
is
let me zoom in. We see it. Okay, yeah, we see it right here
yeah.
and right there.
So that's the idea is we just want to be able to place it to where that key light shows up in both of his eyes so
Nice.
he doesn't look kind of dead.
Right.
Which is a valuable tool. Sometimes actually lighting somebody without an eye light can make you feel differently.
Right,
But in
yeah.
this case, we're not trying to be so subversive that we're breaking every rule,
Right.
So that's really nice, actually. But what we're going to do now is let's make a. Can you zoom out for me so I can see the whole frame? Yeah. Honestly, I think I'm okay with that spread. A lot of times what we have is when we have those sources, you kind of have to start blocking them off because they light too much. Actually, let's go ahead and make that source a little bigger. So it's 1 meter by 1 meter right now. What's that, 3 by 3? Let's make it let's make it like 8 feet by 8 feet. So what's that, like 2.5 meters?
Well, let's see. Something. Maybe
Yeah, it's like 2.5.
2.2 or 2.3. I would think.
So it should be a bit softer now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Nice. I like that. Let's leave that for a second. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make another.
Do we want to go ahead and set the color temperature, or should we do that later?
Let's go ahead and set it to just 5600. I think for this scene, what we'll do is we'll play all lights at 5600 and just leave it.
Right. Yeah.
And then if you want to creatively change things to add contrast later, you're more than welcome to. Again, that's whatever floats your boat in that case, because some of these things are preference again.
Sure. Yep.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that idea of a backlight or an edge light. So conveniently, we have an idea for a motivating light, right? Because there's windows behind him as well. But as with all filmmaking, we are going to augment reality and make it more intentional. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a area source like you just did, but we're going to make it kind of skinny but long.
Okay. So,
and then we're going to float it above his head back where the wall is.
Gotcha. So
but we're not going to go all the way to the ceiling, right? Because we're making this idealized. So we're just trying to go kind of where the top of that as kind of in that column area that's out of our frame. We're going to want it up there.
Something like this.
Yeah, so go up to where kind of that shorter ceiling starts, I think. That'll be a good height.
All right, so something like this. And I guess we want to aim it down to this.
And then aim it down at him.
Perfect. Okay, so something like that.
Yeah. So what we're doing is just motivating off of those windows that eventually we'll see, but that allows him to have a defined silhouette against that column in the background, right?
Do we want to have it a little bit more to the right so that there's a little bit? I mean, I see it on his ear. Like, I mean, it is there. I'm just wondering if we want.
I don't think so. What I don't like in my personal style is what we call light sandwich, which is where the key is on one side and the edge is on the other, because I kind of I kind of find that unnatural unless
Sure,
it's
yeah.
highly motivated from like something that you can see in the shot.
Okay.
What I prefer is actually the key and the edge to be on the same side, because then it makes more sense to your brain that that light is like all continuous. So
Yeah.
I don't mind it the way that it is. What we can do actually, the width is nice. We can just make it a little taller, so
Yeah.
it's just a little softer in that direction. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm really
Um,
liking the. I mean, it's pretty subtle, but just a little bit on the ear, you know.
yeah,
It's
and
just
and
that
it'll be there,
separation.
especially if he moves around at all. And
Right.
when
Yeah.
his hair is there, it's going to
Oh yeah.
catch all of that hair. And so that should work for us quite nicely. Honestly, I'm kind of already feeling it. What I think would be super interesting. Um, Zoom out for me a little bit in the camera view, so that I can kind of see what's going on.
Something like this.
Yeah, so I like those caustics in the background.
Up
What I
here.
think would be Yeah, what I think would be super fun is to find a way to get those caustics into that far wall. Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah. I'm trying to
Um,
think the best way.
you have a sun out there, but you could just add another light.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. In fact, I can probably do like the best ideal way would probably be to do to add a texture to the light, which essentially creates a cookie or gobo for the lighting. Um,
you could also just make a
but yeah, we could
a
make
source outside the window. However, it works conveniently. Um,
probably the easiest thing here would be to quickly throw together a grid and then just use that.
Whatever works. I think it would be interesting to get a little bit of that texture into that kind of hole behind their heads.
Yeah. So let's see. In fact, I might have to like figure out something more advanced. But at least for now, so for reference, let me see if I can throw together something real quick. So
Yeah, and
rotate
don't feel
this.
like any of these solutions have to be thrown together like right now in my presence kind of thing. But
Sure.
I'm just showing you kind of like what we think of when we go into a location. We're looking for how we're going to set this up. Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of the things that we're looking to cheat as much as possible to make it
Yep.
make sense, but still visually interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I can just maybe I'll cut this angle down, and then, here we go. And then like ideally we'd have also some kind of pattern here. Let me pull this down to something like um and then I want to say this is a little bit warmer. So something like that, and then just I guess is what you're envisioning. Something back here. Um and then just let's see.
I don't know if it's updated. It just looks bright to me.
Well, yeah, I mean to really fully do
Yeah.
it,
Okay. There we go.
I mean, you can kind of
Um,
see, like in this case, it's getting the shadow of the column. Um,
and that's okay actually. Like lights and darks are fun, but yeah. And so you play around with it eventually.
yeah,
But basically, I think the idea of having some of those squares in
right,
that
right.
background is super cool.
Yeah, I'll,
Um,
I'll probably just throw like a texture on it, like just some kind of grid texture, and that
yeah,
should
I know
give.
that there's a solution that you can arrive at later that's probably much better.
But yeah, that
And
at least gives
then
us an idea.
I don't mind the contrast on their face. How do you feel about that?
I think it's pretty good. Um, I'm tempted to crank the exposure up just maybe a touch because it is, the wides we had earlier were pretty bright. Um, so it's one of those things. It looks really good. I don't know if it would look weird if has a little bit too much contrast. But yeah,
Sure. The other thing is, I guess you could bring the wide down a little bit. The
which one?
But like, well, if you're worried about it matching, you don't have to bring this up necessarily. You could bring the other one down, but I'm here to make it look the way that you want.
Sure.
So if you want this to be brighter, then we can definitely do that. What I would say is it's probably best then to do the global exposure to go up so that we leave our contrast ratios and just make it a little bit brighter.
That will also allow me to, you know, if I decide I don't like it more bright, it's easier to. And it probably doesn't even take a whole lot. Honestly, let's see.
That's not bad there.
Yeah, maybe something like this. Yeah, honestly, I'm mixed. That might be something I'd have to like sleep on.
Well, and that's the thing is that you can decide your global exposure all the way up until the end as well. You know, because a lot of these concepts they can be bright or dark.
Right.
You know, it's up to you.
Right.
I think another really interesting thing that we could play on is in the wide, you see a lot of that sun hits the floor. Which I like. And also, I am not afraid of overexposing certain parts because that's very real in the world.
Okay.
Things get overexposed. So I don't mind having those highlights that kind of burn out in certain places.
Right.
But let's make another source like that. But let's flip it to where it's like the source is coming up off the ground and place it off the ground to our characters to the left of frame.
To the left of frame.
Yeah. Okay. So sort of like one of those sun hits is also partially motivating the key and kind of making the ground like a little bit of light bounce, if you will. We're faking a bounce off the ground.
So would that be like, would I put it behind the character or?
No. So you would put it. Hang on. So our characters over there. You would put it kind of where I started with our key light, kind of off the floor out there. Yeah.
And then lower to the ground. In fact, I could.
Yeah, so that we might be having problems where that the table blocks it.
Yeah.
So just move it farther away from them, and then what we'll have to do, like in that open space, is just make sure that we open up the angle of that source to where it's going, kind of towards them.
Oh, gotcha. And then I guess we could also cheat things at this angle and hide this table. Potentially, if we needed to make this work. So let's see.
If we need to.
Yeah, we may not. Let's see. So this is without. This is with. I'm not sure if I'm seeing a difference yet. Of course, I could make this brighter.
So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to fake it entirely. Let's raise that source up just a little bit and then actually completely
over here, maybe.
Let's go ahead and make it smaller too. So let's go back to that kind of 1x1 type space. And then point it back at him and let's see what that looks like.
Well, are we pointing it kind of like just horizontal, or do we still want to get that angle where it's pointing upward? I mean, because I could put it on the table if that would work best. Like basically just below the camera line. Yeah,
so what I'm trying to think of is the way that we would do this often is we would take like a fabric and literally just lay a piece of fabric on the ground and just like shoot a light into it, just to kind of give like ambient glow. So I'm trying to think of if it's better to put it on top of the table or if it's going to get weird because it's close to him.
Well, if we made it, if we didn't make it too bright, I think we might be able to get that to
Yeah,
work. So
let's try that.
let's try that.
Because
Obviously,
in theory, this is also going to play. This is going to play for both characters.
right.
So maybe you set it on the table directly, kind of
Yeah.
between them.
Obviously, that's going to
But
be too bright, but let's
right,
dial it to like,
and then go left with it, so it's
okay,
kind of clearly on the key side of the table.
gotcha. So something like that. That's, I think that is showing. Well, let's see. It was showing up a second ago. Let's see if I do that. Okay, that's
It is
definitely,
there.
yeah,
It
that's
is
definitely
there.
showing up.
Um,
But that's probably a
so
little bit too
yeah,
bright. So
let's make it not super bright. But let's
it's
make sure
really
we
subtle.
open up that angle a little bit, just to make sure that it's not just kind of going shooting only straight up.
Oh, you know what? I think I may have accidentally pushed it below the table. Yep. There we go.
There we go.
So let's see. I think it is there. Yeah, it's definitely there,
It's
but
nice.
it's really subtle.
Yeah, I think that trying to think how I want to change the ratios of things. Let's go ahead and leave the power of that at 1 watt. What is the power of our main key light right now?
So let me label these real quick so I can. Okay, so this is our. Do we want to call this our back or our fill? I guess this would be the back.
A rim or backlight,
Rim,
yeah.
This is our table.
Table bounce.
Table bounce. That's a flag. Oh, I'm sorry. These are should be in the lighting folder. Pull that. There we go. This one is our wall, and then our key. So yeah, cool. All right. So our key is currently at 10 in comparison.
So let's take the key to like 7.
Okay.
Okay, 5. And then let's take the total exposure for the room up a little bit to compensate.
All right. Something like, might be a little bit too much, but something like that. Maybe 3.8, something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah. That way his skin is more balanced with what we think the sunlight should be in other places. But see, if you notice, you're getting some nice uplighting on his outfit and whatnot.
Right.
It's kind of reading. So you might have to tweak that to make sure that it definitely, like, from certain angles, it might be weird coming from the table, but that is the idea. So even if you have to move it for a shot, like off the table, just off to the side.
Yeah.
That's the idea, is that, because we do see in that wide shot all those nice hot sun hits hit the floor.
Right.
And that's a very real thing, especially if you're in a concrete or place like that. You're going to get kind of those golden washes. And so what I would say is I think that skip bounce, the table bounce, and the light that hits the wall behind him could probably be just a little warmer. So instead of 5,600, maybe like 5,000, something like that.
Table light. Let's see. Table light would be 5, and the one for the wall. I think I actually already set the one for the wall at 5,000 because it is. I mean, it is. I think a little bit warmer. Compared to the gray of his jacket.
Right. Yeah, that's nice. Speaking of that wall, let's go ahead and make the shadows a little bit harder on that. Not like all the way crispy, but like.
Sure, let me think. This is going to be wall. This. Let's see. I already decreased the spread, so we'll maybe reduce this to. Well, let's see. Trying to
I
think.
think you're aimed off center, so you might just be able to rotate it back in.
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah, let's see. I think okay, so I'm wondering if I have to back this up because I'm struggling to find that column sweet spot or whatever. I mean, again, if as soon as we have like a texture on this, then all of
Yeah,
this
you
can
can kind
be
of put it
like,
wherever you want.
that would sort of be the pattern. I guess we'll just think of this from whatever edges we have and imagine the
Yeah,
grid
I
here.
think
Would you make it tighter maybe? And again, we also do, let's see, if I make this spread 0, obviously that's like infinitely tight. So maybe, because I'm wondering, do I want to,
yeah,
if I reverse this, okay, so here's sort of the reverse of what we had, where here's the column, but
yeah.
we see it.
So maybe on the spread go to like 2.
This is 2, maybe.
I like that fade on the shadows better.
Better,
So,
yeah.
you can change the shape and the gobo later, but I
Right, yeah.
like that
That
quality.
sharpness, yeah.
Yeah. That's nice.
Hmm. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
My only thought is that this light might be a little bit distracting, so we probably would want the final to kind of like push to the left. But other
Well,
than
so
that,
yeah, that's what I was going to say is that because what you're going to be able to tell here is that the light is coming from not super high up because it's able to get under that ceiling. So I think the
yeah,
best placement for that light would be kind of at the bottom of the wall where the wall and the corner meet. So like I wouldn't want the light to go more than halfway up that back wall, if that makes sense.
okay, so like
So
bring
if you
it
kind of
down,
bury it, yeah, down there.
and then maybe push it left. I'm trying to decide what is more. And of course, I guess the other thing, it's pretty hot. Um, but yeah,
And here's the thing that like I'm okay with in this case having the back wall be
really hot.
overexposed
Yeah,
is fine in my book
yeah, yeah.
because I think sometimes you need to understand like I think it's helpful for the audience to understand what bright is,
Sure. Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah, it's all
a light
relative in a
or
lot of
dark
cases.
moment. Yeah, I think it's okay to have things that are a little bit out of control because I think that's it kind of frames the rest of the perspective.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with where this is right now.
Hmm.
So what I would say is these are the concepts that I would look for to reverse. So when you go to the other side,
Right. Yeah.
you would play the same idea, right? You would have a light behind him. You would have a large kind of source as the key light, and then you would move that negative to be on the other windows, the
Right.
opposite side. And instead of because we do see the sun direction, so when we're in that wide, we do see the sun is moving left to right, which is why we're able to see it in the background of this shot. When you flip to Robert's over,
Hmm.
the light just needs to hit tables in the background, right? Because there's more stuff going on in his angle. So it wouldn't play on the wall, but you should be able to re-aim some of them to kind of be in the background, right?
Okay. Yeah. You're saying
Um,
basically when flipping to this side, basically,
right. See how there's those tables that are like the next row over. In theory, some of those are going to be in the background. You could probably hit some of them with a little backlight from that window to justify it.
Mm.
And kind of make some visual interest there. And so the wall can be a bit darker, and then the tables can be the visual interest. So, you're just playing inside of the same sort of continuity that we've established with the lighting, just to kind of make
Right. Yeah.
make aesthetic choices. Um, and then kind of similar idea for any sort of wide when you're looking up. you'd want to block off some of those windows and maybe put black on the wall behind the camera if the wall is white, just to maintain contrast. And then you would probably want to put kind of a soft square source as like a top edge light to justify the key. So if you're looking at an angle like this, right, you'd probably float, maybe an 8-foot kind of square or rectangle, kind of over the space that's in that empty floor space, right on the other side of their tables.
Right here?
Out there.
Yeah.
So in the air, you'd float something that's kind of above them, pointed back, almost like a backlight, but it's big enough and soft enough that you can kind of see the light on their faces. So that way, when you jump into the overs, it makes sense that the light is coming from that direction. And those are kind of the general ideas of what we would go for, right? Because the wide can't be lit the same way that their close-ups are lit in the real world, right?
Right.
So what your brain is used to seeing is harsher, more area lighting on a wide, and it gets prettier as you get closer, right? Because we're able to do more. So that's kind of how I would approach lighting the scene in the real world.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, if I'm tracking what you're saying, you want it to be consistent, and we're basically kind of, the rule for the scene is the sunlight is coming from the left in this case, or I guess in this case it'd be coming from the right.
Correct. But it's coming from the same side of the building, if that makes sense.
Right. And so we'd augment it in the same way. It'd just be reversed of what we did for this character.
Correct. Yep.
And then back here, we're also, even though there's a lot of light, we'd still want to cast.
We're augmenting for our characters
to make the lighting consistent.
Correct.
All right.
And so, and you'd readjust blocking or their position in the bench for every shot too.
Right.
So now we have them positioned for William's shot. But when you flip to the other side, you probably have to shimmy them just a little bit. Right. But maybe it works actually. Actually, it might work. Just looking at the rough angle there, it could work, but position them into a way to where you don't have kind of that dead space off to the left showing, and you have more of the tables and chairs in the background.
Well, right. I mean, that's like you mentioning the sunlight. I could almost see like cheating this entire set of tables. Maybe not too much, because it might be a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting we have a flag right here. Okay, so we're going to have this. So we may not need to cheat it that much, but maybe, there is like for right here, right? There's a lot of kind of dead space.
So right. So just so that when you're looking in between them, you don't kind of have that open, empty wall. But it's more about, now to be fair, this is kind of a weird view anyway, because it's not the actual camera.
Right.
But I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Something like, and I'm just trying to get a quick thing here, but let's see, it's not adjusting. It's not letting me adjust for what I'll have to adjust it. But yeah, something where we're keeping the background in mind. So like we might cheat it to adjust where this column is in the final. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it would be better exactly how you have it, where his head is not on a column, but in between columns.
Right.
And then in this case, you'd block off the windows in front, but because there's so much light behind him, you might need to put one of those flags just off camera to the left, just to kind of, just to kind of maintain shadow, because see how bright his face is comparatively. So to kind of maintain consistency, you might have to play around with some of those ideas. So maybe a small flag off just off the edge of the table there. But then same idea, same key, same rim light idea.
Right. Would a flag be for this spot here in particular?
No, not for the sun in the background, but to give him more shadow on that half of his face.
Okay,
so the flag would be kind of straight up and down or at a slight angle in front of him, kind of between the camera and the actor.
Okay, so somewhere like right
to
in
kind
this
of
area?
block his, yeah. So exactly. So it would probably go, see where that blue line is on the ground
Yeah.
right there? Like that's the line that the flag would take.
Yeah.
And then you would place it just outside of the camera frame
Right.
to kind of help with the contrast on his face, because there's a lot of bounce light coming off this wall to the left.
Gotcha. So basically, to increase this contrast, have something here
Correct.
to
You're just
absorb
cutting
all
off that extra bounce onto his face.
Right. Right.
So that's how we use flags in the real world a lot, is like, hey, it's just really even on their face. So to create one side that's brighter and one side that's darker, instead of adding more light to one side, you can subtract light from the other side, right?
Right.
So there's already a ton of light going on. It's not like we need more for exposure, but we can subtract light from his right camera left side, you know, to make it match more with the contrast ratio that we had on the other side.
Right. Because we want those to be consistent.
Correct. So even though it's not realistic, we're not looking in physical reality. We're looking to trick the brain into not asking questions and just accepting
exactly,
it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing, is that you kind of almost don't want it to be noticed. You want to trick people's brains into just sort of assuming that it made sense and to not even really think about it. So there's an element of like understanding what reality does do.
Right.
And using that as an inspiration for an idealized form of reality where everything is semi-perfect, right?
Right.
Which is why we're not shooting a hard light directly into their face and getting like super hard shadows, which you can do if you want it to look violent or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But in this case, we're making it a little bit more perfect in the sense that it's a little bit softer, and we're playing with these rules. And really what we're doing is 3-point lighting. We're just doing it on a really massive scale, and we know when to break some of those rules. You know?
Right.
So anyway, I don't think we need to get into the nitty gritty of every single shot, but those concepts should play for the entire scene. And like if you do close-ups of anything as well, same idea.
Right. Yeah.
Larger key from the other side of the object than the camera, and negative fill if you have to, and use a rim to kind of cut the object out of the background so that it kind of highlights the object. And, you know, as long as you maintain direction of light so that the light is coming from the same side of the room, you'll be great.
Right. Right. Well, very cool. Let me do a very quick, render here with the hair, because I'd really like to see. How
I'm intrigued as well.
I'm liking this aspect ratio. I'm glad we went with it, because
I like it too.
There's something about it that I guess because we're used to seeing that for theater, but yeah, honestly, I like the hair highlights.
I do too. I think it makes sense when you see the room, like what's going on. And just as far as obviously probably makes no sense to do a render with depth of field at this point, but just for your edification, if I was shooting a scene like this, I would be looking to have my aperture at around a 2.8 or a 4 for a scene like this. So somewhere in there, you'd get enough blur, like a healthy blur on the foreground, so that character's back is not super distracting.
Right. Yeah.
And if that character's back is super distracting, if it's too bright and you keep looking at their shoulders, what you can do is you can put a flag just outside of frame to the left here to stop that key light from lighting his back.
Right. Yeah. Basically, kind of tone him down.
Correct. And if you want to, you can play with the opacity of that if you needed to let some light through.
Right. Yeah.
To taste. And we do that in the real world a lot. In fact, with overs, oftentimes the key light does hit the shoulder of the person that you're looking over. And so in cases like that, we will either put a solid there, or we have what we call nets, which take light down by in increments of half stops.
Right. Yeah.
And so we just select how bright we want it to be, and then we leave a net that covers just them, you know. So you can play with that concept here as well. But yeah, if looking for a final render, if you do render depth of field, I would probably be in the neighborhood of a f4 or f2.8 at the widest. I don't generally like to go super wide open because I find it almost more distracting sometimes in a regular scene to have massive out of focus.
Right. Yeah.
And what I don't like is in a case like this, if their eyes were in focus and like their ear was out of focus.
Well,
Like
it gives it that miniature look.
right. Like I prefer the whole head and subject to be in focus.
Right.
So yeah, I know that's much more taxing on a render. So like, I don't need to see it because I know what it kind of looks like in my head, but
Right.
that's just kind of the ballpark for a scene, for an interior scene like this, probably looking around a 4. And if that's not quite enough separation between your foreground and background and everything, then maybe a 2.8
right.
for aperture. So yeah,
Very cool. All right.
I hope I didn't overcomplicate it, and I hope I made sense.
No, yeah, that to me it makes perfect sense. You know, and I think hopefully I think for our audience, just as I point things out and things that will be good. But certainly, you know, for anyone watching this, sometimes it does take time to pick up some of the terminology. Um, but yeah, just a lot of that's just to process things like stops and the measurements of light. Of course, there's lots of resources, lots of YouTube videos on those specific topics, but I think we got a great overview on just all the details and the complexities. And as you can see, it's not just you set up three. I mean, you set up 3-point lighting, but it's not just you throw in some things.
Right.
And
Like
you're done.
there are rules and concepts to follow, but the real world is just learning to adapt everything because every single situation is different. And, you know, in this case, I did sort of lead you through like my entire process, as it were, of
Right.
how things go down. So, like, obviously, the first conversations are about the script. It's like, what's going on? Who's kind of in charge in the scene? Who are we identifying with? What are some interesting ways that we can cover a scene that actually say something? So, like, I don't just like showing up to a scene and just covering it normally for the sake of that.
Right.
So I think I would humbly suggest that maybe you start on the close up here of him like opening the can. I think that's really interesting,
Yeah.
especially as far as the scene is concerned. You know, opening up this topic, and then you know maybe a clean single on Roberts for those first few lines, and then switching to these more classic overs after Williams enters the conversation, and then I think putting a wide near the end and then leaving it on Williams just alone is the way that I would probably go about the scene. That's just my opinion, though. So and then these are the concepts that I would use to light all of those shots. You know, so
Right.
yeah.
And definitely, you know, I mean, that provides, even if there's tweaks here and there, that definitely provides the thought process and the foundation, if you will. And honestly, not just the foundation, but most of the walls and the paint.
Fair enough.
But yeah,
I shall let you decide the color of paint.
maybe it really all depends. But I mean, this has been fantastic, and I'm really digging this result. Like you said, there might be a little bit too much light over here on the Roberts character, but other than that, it's like I'm digging this. It's looking really good. All right. Well, thank you again, Nathan, for showing just all this amazing information. If people want to see your work and all that, how can people find you on the internet?
The best way to kind of keep up with me, honestly, is my Instagram account, which is at Nathaniel Paine _DP. My first name is spelled differently, though. It's NATHANAELPAINE, Nathaniel Paine. And there'll probably be a link to that in the description. I have frames from my video work up there, and I have a lot of my personal photography on there as well, which is, also in my aesthetic realm. And I respond to things very quickly on there. So if anybody has any questions or just wants to talk about any of this stuff, I am a film nerd. So more than happy to have people reach out to me there. And I'll get back as soon as I can. I think I'm also going to give James a link to an interesting project that we can link here as well. But yeah, that's the best way to kind of get a hold of me.
Awesome. Yeah, and the information will definitely be in the description. So I really appreciate it. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to you guys for watching. A lot of great content. I know it can be a lot to watch through something like this, but if you made it to the end, thank you so much. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, liking this video on YouTube, sharing this video with friends, hitting the notification bell to stay up to date, and please comment, because I've realized how important that is for the YouTube algorithm.